a plan to protect one of Oahu's most populous areas from devastating flooding. It's been years in development, but concerns from the public and a skyrocketing price tag have slowed efforts to get the Ala Wai flood control project underway. Now the Army Corps of Engineers has a new proposal on the table. So what's in the plan? And what do community leaders think needs to change? Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff. You'd think everyone would support a plan to prevent catastrophic flooding, especially in an area essential to the state's economy. But when the proposal includes things like 6-foot walls around the Ala Wai Canal and raising homes off the ground, getting everyone to agree on a plan isn't so easy. Can we find a middle ground today to keep people from running for higher ground in the future? We look forward to your participating in tonight's show. You can email or call in your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guests. Eric Merriam is the Army Corps of Engineers project manager. In addition to the Ala Wai project, he has been lead planner and project manager on flood risk management studies in Puerto Rico and North Carolina. He joins us from Pittsburgh via Zoom. Sydney Lynch is the president of Protect Our Ala Wai Watershed. It's a grassroots organization that aims to promote nature-based watershed restoration and protection consistent with Ahupua'a principles and Native Hawaiian customs and practices. Rick Egid is the president of the Waikiki Improvement Association, a private nonprofit organization focused on supporting the business environment of Waikiki. He is also co-chair of the Ala Wai Watershed Collaboration. And Representative Andrew Takuya Garrett represents Manoa and parts of Macaulay and Mo'ili'ili. He is one of 9 legislators who signed a letter to the Army Corps of Engineers expressing concerns about the project plan. And I think because many people at home are not particularly aware with the details of this plan, I'm going to break with our usual tradition and give Eric Merriam from the Corps of Engineers a little bit more time than usual to please explain what is on the table right now from the Corps' point of view. We have a graphic that we would like to put up for the audience while you describe it. Can you just give us a general sense of what you need to accomplish and what's the physical structures that you'll be proposing?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Daryl. So just for everybody's understanding, this is a flood risk management plan. And so we are focused on reducing riverine flooding and promoting resiliency throughout the entire Ala Wai watershed. Whenever we set out, we considered all areas within the watershed equally in terms of our ability, or in terms of what we were seeking to do in terms of reducing flood risk, whether it be economic damages or life safety risk. So just to kind of briefly walk through the plan and the figure that everybody's looking at, we'll start up at the top of the Manoa watershed. The highest or the furthest up in the watershed our plan goes is at the Woodlawn Bridge. If folks remember, I think it was back in 06, the flooding in 06, the floodwaters jumped the bridge there at Woodlawn Bridge and then flowed down through the University of Hawaii campus and caused a lot of damage. So the flood wall at Woodlawn Bridge would be seeking to keep the water in the channel and prevent that from happening in the future and flooding out those homes.
Let me just interrupt you just so we can follow on this map. So that the wall next to Woodlawn Bridge is on the right-hand side of this map. Is that correct? The small red line on the right side?
That's correct. It's a small red line up in Manoa Stream. I appreciate that. Thanks, Daryl. So yeah, so on this figure, red lines denote flood walls. Little yellow triangles are road closures associated with those flood walls. There are, I think, green lines that represent earthen berms or levees. And then there's a large detention feature at the Ala Wai Golf Course. So essentially, the Woodlawn flood wall I mentioned, if you travel downstream, there's a flood wall so another red line at the confluence of the Manoa and Palolo streams. That is to prevent flooding in that community, but also prevent additional flooding that might be caused by keeping water in the stream because of the flood walls at Woodlawn Bridge. We then have flood walls that encircle the entire Manoa Palolo Canal and then wrap around the entire Ala Wai Canal. And then in the middle of that, there is the Ala Wai Golf Course. This is a detention feature. It is meant to hold additional storage additional floodwaters. So there are 6-foot berms and 6-foot flood walls that would be going around the entire golf course. We cannot dig down into the golf course because the water table is so high, so we build up around it to allow additional water storage, reducing peak flows in the Ala Wai Canal itself. I had mentioned flood walls. All flood walls at this point are assumed to be 6 feet high, but we have done a number of things to kind of address community concerns associated with that. One is we've added things like canoe closures. So we know that access to the water is critical for the communities within the watershed. And so canoe closures to allow boaters access to the Ala Wai Canal. We're also looking at the addition of a 3-foot walkway behind the flood wall. So essentially, when you're standing on that walking path, you'd only have about a 3-foot wall in front of you, enabling you to see Diamond Head Crater, the Ala Wai Canal, and so forth. And so those are just some additional features.
Perfect. Good job. And I don't mean to interrupt you so quickly, but I think
Great.
that this is a lot to cognate, and I'm kind of like, okay. So we'll start with that. We basically described these physical structures that are going in around this, and I'm quite struck by how much is there still. I always thought of this as a little bit of a backed off of a plan, but this is still a lot of stuff. Andrew Takuya Garrett, Representative Garrett, what are the main community concerns about what Eric just described?
Sure. Well, I think at this point, this project is definitely an improvement from past iterations. As you recall, when you hosted this show 3 years ago, a heavy feature was really these detention basins in the upper reaches of the watershed. Thankfully, the Army Corps has listened to the community, and they've removed these from the equation. There was one proposed in my district at Manoa Valley District Park. If you go there on any weekday or weekend, you can see right away what a heavily used park it is. So the thought of losing a good chunk of the baseball fields for the purposes of excavating, who knows how many cubic yards of soil to build a basin and then potentially a levee or a berm on the Mackay side of the portion, just to protect the community for something that may happen once every 25 or 50 years. There was some concerns raised about that. Just whether the cost or the trade-off was worth it. So I do want to commend the Army Corps for taking that off the table. Another concern is the visual blight aspect of the walls itself in this current iteration. I'm not an engineer, so I don't want to go too much into the technical stuff, but as Eric mentioned, this really is a pretty extensive network of flood walls that are going to be 6 feet high in a lot of portions. Some engineers I have talked to, however, were a little disappointed that some features like a floodgate and a flood pump were taken off the table. Back in 2019, the City Council, under the leadership of a former Manoa legislator, Ann Kobayashi, they retained the services of a local engineering company called Oceanet. And one of the things they had proposed, after a very robust community outreach campaign, was to set up a network of underground tunnels. So you basically capture the water in the upper reaches of the watershed, and through a network of micro tunnels, it would actually lead directly to the ocean, bypassing the canal altogether. Again, I can't speak if this would work or not, but the Army Corps did vet it, and they've screened it out as a possible solution.
Let me ask Cindy Lynch with Save Our Ala Wai Watershed. This is a fairly hardened approach, but what do you folks think would be more effective without having quite so much construction?
Well, I think for us, one of the main things is stream maintenance. If you look at floods in the past years, the 2020 flood in Haleiwa was caused by debris coming down, blocking the bridges and coming out. The 2018 one in Ainahaina on the Wailupi River has a boulder detention basin that was already full up, and then below stream it was unimproved channel, and again it flooded Kalanianiole Highway there by blocking up at the bridge. And then the 2004 Woodlawn one, also the bridge there was supposed to have a 10-foot clearance, but there was a dip under it and it naturally silted up 5 feet. So in 2004, only 5 feet of clearance, debris came down and flooded. So for us, when we looked at things, and we went out and looked at similar features in the watershed, the Haoni one, the Wailupi one, and Kalawahini one over behind Roosevelt School, and it seemed the maintenance is really lacking. And I'm not slamming the city or anything because they don't have the money or the manpower. There's one fund for roads, streams, and sidewalks that is a pool of money that they pull from. So obviously the loudest voice gets the money, and we would like to see dedicated funding for stream cleaning. At one point in this latest iteration, the one person did say that there's only 3 streams cleaned a year, and normally the city cleans around the bridges. Now you got to understand that streams are owned by public, city, and the state.
Right.
So different areas are under different people.
Let me move over to Rick Egan with the Hawaii Improvement Association. Where do you folks stand on this? Is there a sense that all of this conversation is making folks nervous about the industry, that this flood could happen anytime? And then what's, you know?
Well, it could happen anytime. I mean, we've been very fortunate in terms of experiencing catastrophic storms. I think part of that is due to our geographic location, and but first, I think one of the first indications that is that climate change is going to bring about more storms, and so I think it is appropriate that we're doing this kind of planning going forward. I as well, and my constituents as well, we have concerns about a 6-foot wall, and so it really needs to be done in an appropriate fashion. I mean, I don't want to see it just against the borders of the canal. I'd like to see it step back from the canal, around the parks that are in the area, so that you don't just have this massive wall. And the big change from the previous plan was those were 4-foot walls, and I appreciate that there's got to be trade-offs, and so that's why we have 6-foot walls. But I actually agree that I believe that one of the important parts of making this whole flood control work is the maintenance in the watershed, and which is not being done sufficiently. And it is the city, and in some places the state, that are responsible for that. I think the city's proposal for a stormwater utility would help in this way, but you know, it's got to work its way through the process.
Plus, that's taxes on homeowners too. But let me go back to Eric, Miriam. Eric, first, rather than discuss a whole lot of different alternatives right now, let me get a little bit more on the plan. Do you have a sense of how much it would cost, how long it would take, those sorts of things, and where does the money come from?
So we are currently just undertaking what we call a feasibility study to identify what we call a recommended plan. And so once we finish the feasibility study, that will go to Congress, and Congress will have to authorize construction and then fund construction. And so the timeline for construction after the study really kind of is dependent on Congress. And so that's essentially out of our hands at that point. We're still tweaking the plan. And so, the figure that you showed, and so I say that because to kind of get to your question of how much will it cost, we're on the order of hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's not it's not cheap for what the average folks would think is cheap plan, right? But it's important to note that, this is a lot of infrastructure, and a lot of infrastructure is necessary in this watershed to reduce risk to the communities and the folks living and working within the watershed on a daily basis. So there are updates to the plan, and I just wanted to quickly address some of Andrew's points or Rick's points about, so we're looking at kind of moving the flood walls around the parks along the canal, again, so folks can enjoy those areas adjacent to the canal on a daily basis. So we did do that, and I also want to note that 6 feet is not a hard and fast number for everywhere. As we move forward through the study, we will undertake what we call optimization, where we'll look at kind of adjusting the height up or down either way. And so that 6 feet will change in many areas throughout the watershed. And so I just want folks to know that as we move forward through the study, 6 feet will not, the entirety of the flood wall will not remain 6 feet. It will change. We just don't know how it will change. That's kind of the next phase of the study.
One thing that I'm wondering about is and maybe Representative Garrett can explain this. You have different sources of money. We talk about hundreds of millions of dollars of federal money. We talk about state and county money cleaning streams. Restoring watersheds is a whole other thing. And then what Rick mentioned, the stormwater plan, which would be basically taxing homeowners based on how much water flows off the property. Landowners,
not just
Landowners.
homeowners.
Oh, okay. Hotels too.
Government.
And so,
And government.
Hotels, nonprofit.
who do you think, Representative Garrett, should be paying for this? I mean, is it a federal problem, or is it all of our problem? And is there a way that we could mitigate the size of this project by being more balanced across the community?
Right. So I think the elephant in the room here is the local share of this project. Civil engineering projects like this are subject to a 65-35 cost share.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Nope.
Didn't we get there with the last project where the county and the state had dedicated a match?
Yeah, I think Sydney can speak to some of the legal issues that came to play here. But initially, Governor Ige was prepared to issue $125 million in bonds through what's called certificates of participation. But there was a lawsuit that was filed, and the judge essentially halted the project for, I believe, because the EIS wasn't complete at that point.
And the legislature turned down the funding. That's why they went to issue the COPs.
Oh, I see.
There was $125 million share for the state and the city, and the legislature turned them down, and then Governor Ige went to get the certificates of participation.
So, Eric, as we've moved along and have gone back to the drawing board on this, is the cost likely to keep going up?
So, there is a history with this project, right? So the 2017 feasibility study resulted in a recommendation that had a certain cost. That recommendation, as they went through an additional design, was determined that the plan was not going to function as they had hoped, and so they had to kind of go back to the drawing board again. And so when they did that the second time, that's when the costs kind of escalated because of the requirements for things like a large-scale pump station in the Ala Wai Canal. And so our current plan does not have a lot of those features that were driving that elevated cost kind of in the second iteration, things like the pump station. And so currently, again, the plan is continuing to change, right? The plan that we just showed is not what will be in the draft report that will be released shortly. But currently, the cost for our plan is below what it was kind of in the second iteration. And so again, it's still up in the air, but no, we don't expect the cost to continue to balloon. Although, it is continuing to change.
Well, the nature of most projects is delay just automatically increases cost. But Rick Egan, though, I mean, what's the visitor industry's skin in this game? Like, it just strikes me that so much of this, although, as you were pointing out, it does help protect the residential and business areas outside of Waikiki, but I mean, is the industry contributing anything to the cost of taking care of this?
Well, it depends on how this plan ends up being proposed. I think one of the things I just want to insert here before we lose track of this is the whole process, and Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but even after you come up with your proposed plan, you're still going to have to do a federal EIS before the project can kick off. Is that not correct? No?
So we are doing an EIS concurrently we create what we call a feasibility report and integrated environmental impact statement. So they are being conducted at the same time.
I see.
Now.
Okay, so we are actually in the EIS portion as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean,
They submitted in April.
Just continue my question. I mean,
Yes.
Is the visitor industry paying? What's their skin in the game in this thing that's primarily seems like it's to protect Waikiki?
Well, I think it's important to note that we are paying, the Waikiki by itself pays about 18% of all the property tax on the island. And so if you're saying the city is going to come up with a share and the state's going to come up with a share, first of all, Waikiki is generating a lot of the cash that enables those two government bodies to make those contributions. Now, whether there's a specific cost share in terms of the project, I've never seen that as a proposal. I think that the money would come from the city and the state. Primarily the state, I think, is the way it's been done in the past. But if we move forward with the next phase, which is the maintenance of this whole project, and I think it has to include a lot of things we talked about in terms of being able to improve the environment's ability to absorb flooding. I think there you're going to is going to require additional funding, and if that takes place, then certainly Waikiki would have to pay its relatively high share of that because of our property values.
Let me ask Eric.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
Darryl, I was just going to say, so you had mentioned that, this plan primarily protects Waikiki, and I'd like to, I don't want to say push back, but push back on that slightly, because again, as I mentioned earlier, we really took a look at the entire watershed, and so yes, the flood walls are adjacent to Waikiki, but the flood walls also do a lot for Makalimo-Iliʻili, right? So Makalimo-Iliʻili gets flooding from the Manoa-Palolo Canal, from the Ala Wai Canal, from the Manoa Stream up at Woodlawn Bridge, from the Makiki Stream. So Makalimo-Iliʻili kind of can flood from everywhere. And our plan, reduces that flooding from all directions for Makali, Mo'iliili, for Ala Moana, for all of those other communities around that area as well as the communities up in the Manoa Stream. And so I just wanted to highlight that Waikiki is a big beneficiary of this proposed plan, would be, I'll say, but many other communities are as well.
Could I speak to that a little bit?
Sure.
The Makali-Mo'iliili area has storm drain system problems, and that's under the city's district. So we'd like to see something where the city and the state all come together to work on more comprehensive flood planning. Because if you the Army Corps will only do riverine flooding, but the big problem over there is also the storm drain system and in Waikiki. So if they would work on that as well in concert with this flood planning, it would be more effective.
Explain to me what riverine means as opposed to some other kind of flooding.
Well, Eric can speak to this, but the Army Corps can only touch things once it's in the stream. So that's why a lot of the ecosystem restoration they can't do, because it's up in the mountains, way up in the mountains. But if you can show that it noticeably takes away the effect of the flooding, then they can help with that. But unless there's a certain percentage, they can't do anything outside of the streams. So the storm drains, even though they come into the stream, they're not going to touch them. That's city work.
And actually, that's one of the questions I have about this project too, Eric, is that once you've built these walls around the Ala Wai, how's the water in Waikiki going to drain? Because a lot of our Waikiki water now does drain into the canal.
And they're going to have flap gates on it to shut the drains off. So you build the walls up, the water's in there. If you don't have a pump, how's the water going to go out and how's it going to get in? That's one of our
Eric,
key
you
questions.
want to try that?
He's been asked this a lot.
Yeah, no, well, in full disclosure, I do not have my technical lead on the call tonight, and so I can only dip so far into the technical realm because I myself am not kind of the engineer on the project. But so we do have flap gates. We're proposing flap gates along the outlets going into the canal for storm drains, and that's to prevent water from backing up into the storm drain. Our modeling does take into consideration currently water coming out of the existing drainage systems into the canal. And I also want to note that, so we're doing modeling now, but as we move forward through the study, we will do more detailed modeling, especially as we get further into the detailed planning and engineering and design, pre-construction engineering and design phases, which are kind of subsequent to the current effort. We will be doing a lot of that internal drainage modeling and how all of that plays together with the system now. But currently, all of that is considered in our models, and our models are not showing that there is significant induced flooding because of the walls. The water is able to drain. A lot of it has to do with timing, has to do with things like the flap gates and so forth. And so, again, I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you. No, because the flap gates, I'm like, okay, I don't even, give me a picture. But we are getting some. First, I'd like.
Flap gates means the water can only go one way.
One way.
So the water can't go from the canal back up into the streets.
Okay. Representative Garrett, before we move on to some questions, did you anything you want to pitch in right at this stage?
No, I think you asked us a minute ago about who's going to pay for some of this stuff. I mean, we talked about the ecological restoration. I represent Manoa. In the back of the valley, it's just riddled with invasive albizia trees. If there's a plan in place to eliminate that and replant it with native plants, there's also a feral pig issue. If we're able to fence it off and try to deal with the erosion, we can allow the watershed itself to naturally kind of heal itself, recharge our aquifer at the same time. It doesn't necessarily have to be a part of this project. One of the highlights of this past legislative session is the additional resources we gave to the Department of Land and Natural Resources. They have jurisdiction over the conservation lands back there, so perhaps that's something we can consider funding additionally.
I would like to speak to that because this plan has been going since 1992. It was started by the DLNR as an ecosystem restoration project for the Ala Wai Canal because it was so stinky. They brought in the Army Corps in '98 for their engineering muscle and money, and they brought in the flood control at the same time. That's 30 years ago. If they'd been doing these soft measures all along, the albizias would have been like 2 feet tall back then, and they could have taken them out easily. But 30 years we've been talking about the big solution for these things. If they do these soft solutions all along, they'd be more effective.
And this Army Corps project isn't going to affect the fact that the Ala Wai Canal is one of the most polluted waterways in the country. Yeah. It's running right through the heart of Honolulu. Mm-hmm. It's really a shame. It's a community calamity.
Yeah, let me go to some of these questions because they're going to this. For example, Dean from Honolulu says, just dredge the canal and make it deeper so it can drain out. Why spend more money that doesn't solve the problem? But What about just making that canal significantly deeper? I guess most of the time there's not enough water.
No, that won't work. They said it's like a bathtub. You dredge it, it's just going to fill up. And then the other thing is to open it up from the other side and flush it that way. But they say that's not good either. So, you know.
Well, I guess and then another caller, Alex from Makiki. Back in the olden days, 3 streams flowed into Waikiki: Makiki, Manoa, and Palolo. Those streams were bottled up into the Ala Wai so Waikiki could be developed. Is there any thought of putting large conduits underground with a levee to open up at appropriate times to alleviate flooding? Eric?
That's the other end.
Another thought on that?
Yeah, so you know, I love hearing all these ideas. So what I'll say is in this study, we considered over 200 what we call management measures, so individual actions that we could take throughout the watershed to reduce flood risk. And all of the things that were just mentioned were part of those 224 measures, right? So we looked at additional tunnels, conduits underneath of Waikiki, on the other side, a secondary outlet, both, you know, open outlet or underground using existing stormwater infrastructure. And so we looked at all of those things, and again, you know, as we go through all of this, our goal is to find what we call the optimal plan. It's the plan that maximizes benefits, whether they're economic, whether they're social benefits, things like, you know, reducing risk for socially vulnerable populations and so forth. So we're trying to find that optimal plan. And all of our analysis and all of the things that we looked at led us to the prospective plan, largely, although it's changed a little bit, that you looked at tonight. So all of those things were considered, and I will kind of direct the viewers tonight to our website, honolulu.gov/Ala Wai, where we have what we call the management measure tracker spreadsheet, where it lists out all the 200 and some measures that we considered and whether they were screened out or not and why. And so I just recommend everybody go and take a look if you're interested.
Sounds like a fun thing to do on a Friday night. I guess what I'm kind of wondering now at this stage of the program is, it seems like, I'll tell a quick story. So I used to work at a hotel in Waikiki called the Kalia Hotel, right on the corner of Saratoga and Kalia Road. And when it rained a lot, the storm drain that let out the water underneath that area would be clogged with sand from the tides and natural tides and so on. And we would have our parking lot full of water, and it would blow out all the electricity, so we had no electricity in the hotel. So that happened more than once during the year I worked there. I mean, so many of these things, once you install them, you got to maintain them. Or do we have the will, Representative Garrett, to actually install these things and then maintain them?
Yeah, so I think the prior understanding was that the state would fund the local share and essentially turn everything over to the city and county at that point. So I believe the mayor is willing to take that on. You have to ask him directly. I don't want to speak for him. But of course, you know, the government has never historically done a good job of maintaining things, you know, whether it's schools, parks, roads, sewers, even streams in this particular case. I know just kind of working off of what Sydney was talking about earlier regarding maintenance. You know, I used to lead a lot of stream cleanups in Manoa Stream, so I can personally attest to the condition of how so much of it is just overgrown with vegetation. And one of the challenges, we kind of have this hodgepodge network of who's responsible for stream cleanups. State law currently reads that the abutting landowner is responsible up to the halfway point. But I would argue, you know, a lot of these homeowners don't have the resources or the expertise. And we really should have one government entity is responsible for all of our waterways rather than this kind of system, because, you know, what good is cleaning a stream if your neighbor further up is just dumping logs or spraying pesticides in there?
That's why I like the idea of a stormwater utility, which has been a proposal on the table from the city. I'm not completely in support of the way they want to execute it, but I think the idea has a lot of merit. And that would give us the capacity, I think, to maintain this system, because just what the Army Corps is proposing alone, I don't think it's going to be adequate. But I think if we can couple that with this increased maintenance on a local level, and the development of other things like, you know, making our surfaces more permeable so that they can absorb more water, the natural approach to floodwater control. I think there's a lot of things that we can do locally that will improve the situation, but if there's nobody planning for it and doing it, it's never going to happen. We've been talking about this for 30 years. made very little progress.
Yeah.
You know, I find it interesting that one of the things that Sydney said was that the origination of this process was over the concern about the pollution of the Ala Wai Canal and the fact that it's just it's obsolete in terms of what it was intended to do. But you know, I also kind of wonder if there's so many other places in the state of Hawaii that are at risk of severe flooding that we're not looking at projects like this. You know, how do we choose, Eric? How did you end up choosing that this would be the area that would have the focus of so much capital?
I can answer that.
But I'm curious as to where, from the federal point of view, how do you choose the place you're going to be doing this?
Money.
So the Army Corps of Engineers, you know, essentially we don't come in and recommend where something gets done. We are a partnering organization. So an entity comes to us and says, hey, we have a concern, we have a problem, and we want you to partner with us to address that problem. And so we get requests from what we call local sponsors, whether they're states, local governments, other entities for assistance. And so that is generally how we start working on projects in places. It's not that we come in and say the federal government thinks you should do something here. It's that we respond directly to requests for assistance by local entities.
And originally
so,
that was the
yeah.
state in this situation.
state.
The state of Hawaii, and again, this is 30 plus years ago, approached the Army Corps of Engineers for recommendations on what could be done in this area.
Yeah.
But a lot of times that's because that's where the money is.
Well, there has to be the cost of benefit analysis. So there has to be a certain level of gain that for the Army Corps to put their money in. So if you're since Waikiki is such a high risk area, it's so expensive, it's worth it to put the money into this project where it might not be other places. So
I mean,
So
go ahead, Eric. Sorry.
I was going to say, so we also, and I don't want to divert too much from the Ala Wai study discussion, but the Army Corps of Engineers does have other authorities that can look at flood risk management or aquatic ecosystem restoration on smaller scales. And so it may not be at the level of, you know, Honolulu, right, in terms of the Waikiki watershed flood risk issues. But if it's a smaller stream, a smaller community, we do have other authorities that can help address those more targeted, smaller issues as well. So I just want viewers to keep that in mind.
You know, Representative Garrett, I'm just thinking from a statewide perspective, are you satisfied that we're putting the right amount of attention on this area versus other areas that might need attention?
Sure. I think part of the challenge is the scope of the project as well too, and trying to figure out like where we do allocate our limited resources. You know, heading into my first legislative session, it was great that we had a $2 billion surplus. That, you know, we were always told by our finance chair that, you know, things can change in a heartbeat, and sure enough, when the Council on Revenues met, they ended up projecting downward in terms of our tax revenues. So we saw the governor exercise his line item veto authority to cut certain elements out of our budget. So I think at the end of the day, we really need to figure out where we need to put these limited resources. You know, if you ask people out in the community, is the Ala Wai one of your top 10 things that you want funded? You know, if it's going to cost us locally over $100 million, I doubt it'll make the top 25 or 50 list.
Well, that's kind of what I'm getting at. Is you know, it's like, what's the way less alternative, the way less expensive? You know, what happens if we don't do this, Eric? I mean, Rick?
Well, if we get the kind of storm that we anticipate can happen more often, given the climate change situation, you know, it could cost hundreds of millions of dollars in a storm. Yeah. So, I mean, if we don't spend this money, we could end up, you know, sort of like pay me now or pay me later.
Let me ask this question, though, Rick. Okay, so Waikiki is also highly at risk from climate change, sea level rise, tsunami, you name it. So the companies that built the hotels presumably have taken some of this into account in how they build the buildings. Mm-hmm. I mean, it really is the risk from a flood, of a freshwater flood coming down, mm-hmm. any worse than a tsunami or something like that, that if I'm an owner, I've got to be building around that. I mean, is there responsible for the individual property owners to be prepared for this instead of hoping the government tries to prevent it from happening?
Well, the individual property owners do look at how how they need to manage their property. But the problem is that so many of these issues are much broader in terms of stormwater, managing stormwater. Individual property owners just can't do it. It needs to be done regionally by the government entities.
Okay, let me extend that question though to you folks. I mean, is there a low impact plan that might happen as quickly, maybe less expensively, or maybe the money's spread out over more areas? Are there alternatives to this build?
I'd like to ask about the sea level rise in Waikiki, because what is projected, if it's 1/2 inch to 3 feet, what is the flooding from across the canal going to be? Because if you're going to retrofit, if you're going to have to retrofit, because I understand like the Princess Kailani, Ritz-Carlton, they're all building up the Anaha and Kakaako to address this potential 3 feet of sea level rise. So if you're going to be doing that, how high is the flooding from the Mauka side predicted to be, Eric? I mean,
so I can't speak to specific flood elevations, but what I can say is that in our study, so even though we're focused on riverine flooding or flooding coming from the Manoa, the Palolo, the Makiki, and the Ala Wai Canal, we are mandated, we must consider how that flooding interacts with sea level rise, with storm surge. So we incorporate 3+ feet of sea level rise through, I think, 2080 in our models. And so when we look out into the future and we look at future flooding and we look at how our project would be performing at that date, that the sea level, we are assuming sea level rise has occurred to that level. And so the maps, the data that you'll see in the draft report have that built into it. And so I do want folks to realize that although we are looking at riverine flooding, we have to look at how sea level rise kind of interacts with that riverine flooding and what types of things we need to do to address that combined risk. Darryl, you brought up a great point. We are focused on riverine flooding. We do not have the authority in this study to look at purely coastal risk, things like tsunamis. And we talked about ecosystem restoration before. What we say is that this is our study and this proposed project is one critical piece of the puzzle, right, for addressing all of those issues within the watershed. And this study doesn't preclude those additional efforts from being undertaken. This just helps us to address flood risk now. And it is the most effective and efficient, the quickest way to help reduce the risks associated with riverine flooding and those risks and how they interact with sea level rise.
And the legislature actually appropriated money this last session to begin that planning process in terms of sea level rise in Waikiki. And I think it's a total, there was $400,000 in the last session. I think they did another $800,000 stretched over these next 2 years. So I think it's like $1.2 million to do that planning for how you're going to adapt Waikiki to handle sea level rise. So it isn't directly linked to this project, obviously, but this project is on the table as well, so it is being considered in that whole process.
Let me ask this question though. If this storm happened tomorrow, what would happen? What would happen, Rick?
Waikiki would get shut down. And if Waikiki gets shut down, then you're going to experience tremendous amount of loss in terms of revenue for the state.
And then what happens? Who comes in and supports the industry, supports the workers in a situation like that?
And actually, I'm not finished.
Oh, sorry.
Because you're also going to have a great deal of flooding. It depends on how widespread, like we were saying earlier, this storm is. I mean, it could affect the whole island, for example.
Yeah.
And so you've got, in addition to the business in Waikiki being shut down, you're looking at all this residential damage that could potentially take place as well. So we would suddenly be in a situation like you've seen in some of the areas on the mainland, Guam, but in Florida, where it's going to take a tremendous amount of effort to recover from that damage.
But does the federal government usually step in those situations and start
And I think,
bailing people
Eric,
out?
I think that's part of your whole calculation, because yes, the federal government would. So the federal government is looking at this project saying, well, if we build this now, we might have to spend less money later to deal with this catastrophic event.
Eric, is that a fair description of the calculus?
That's correct. When we look at calculating benefits, we look at the probability of any given storm kind of over a 50-year period, so about 2080, right? We're saying, okay, on any given year, what's the annual damage, right? And so we do look at how much damage, what are the risks kind of continually through that time frame. And then if we put this project in, what are those benefits? How much damage, how much life safety risk are we reducing? And so he's absolutely, Rick is absolutely correct in that statement. And, it's the old adage, right? What is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? And so we would rather be spending money now to prevent these issues than coming in later and having to kind of again and again come in and do recovery efforts.
So go ahead. I can feel you wanting to say something.
Well, I do have a question, because the original project was the 100-year flood, 1% of 100, and now we're down to a 20 or a 50-year flood. So I've heard, like, Jeff Mertz on your board has said, why, if it's not going to be the full 100-year, why bother? So I guess my question is, why has the level of flooding that you're going to be addressing come down, and doesn't that lessen? I mean, what happens when we get that really big flood? Your stuff you're building isn't going to address that, and that's what the original project was supposed to be. And now we're going to do a 25 or a 50-year flood. So if that happens, the Woodlawn flood was supposed to be a 20-year flood, and that didn't damage Waikiki or even affect the canal. So I just guess since the level of flooding has been reduced, has that also reduced the risk to Waikiki or other places? Now, I agree that Muiliili is the bottom of the bowl, and they need berms and stuff like that. But what is really the real risk to Waikiki now?
Yeah, so Cindy, you had asked about, so for those listeners that might not be familiar, the previous plan was protect isn't the right word, but looked at protecting the area against a 100-year flood. So that's a flood that occurs on average every 100 years or has a 1% chance of occurring any given year. Since that time, really, the Army Corps has changed how we do planning, right? So now we're not focused on a specific event. And so we always get asked this question, well, what event are you looking at now, right? And I say somewhere between 20 and a 50-year event, because really what we try to do now is we're not designing for a specific event. We're, again, trying to find that optimal plan where we maximize benefits per cost. So we call them net benefits, and they can be economic benefits, they can be, other social benefits. And so we try to capture a whole bunch of different types of benefits, but it's that plan that kind of, we call it a benefit cost ratio or net benefits, right? That maximizes the difference between the benefits you get and the cost that you pay to get those benefits. And so today, I do not know what that optimal level is, because that comes into the optimization period where we go in and we start adjusting the heights of the flood walls, adjusting the heights of the berms and levees. And that really gets us that optimal plan. So that's how we identify the plan now moving forward, as opposed to picking like a 100-year plan and then trying to go forward.
I get what you're saying, and one thing I was wondering about is whether the 30 or 40-year flood now is equivalent to what a 100-year flood would have been, given the changes we've had in our environment.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, but the way I understand it, you're really talking about how much water is coming down. So we're going to have flooding at any of those. If we had a 20-year storm, we're going to have flooding. Or a 50-year storm, we're going to have flooding. It's a question of how much water. Yeah. And so if the Army Corps project is built, then we're going to be able to handle a certain amount of water. And so it's going to have a positive benefit at any of those storm levels. And so therefore, I think it still makes sense to move forward with this project, but it cannot be the only thing we do, which is something I really agree with.
So you said that there are some aspects of this that you do agree with. What is it that you actually disagree with about this plan? What's your biggest objection?
This particular iteration?
Yeah.
I don't really object to that much in it. As I said, we prefer to see more nature-based, and I do question, I hate to say it, but because I think the level of threat it's going to be addressing has been lowered. So there are other areas in the island that these rain bombs could hit. So you're going to spend all this money to protect against something that may or may not happen.
Let me ask Andrew Garrett, what are you hearing from the residents now about what their level of tolerance is for either these walls or just anything up where they live that will affect downstream where other people live or work?
Sure. My community lived through this flood. They know this is not a hypothetical exercise or discussion. The 2004 flood is still fresh in the minds of many of my constituents. But I think, again, we go back to the maintenance when we talk about that particular flood. They did an after-action report to figure out what the main cause was. They did attribute it back to the lack of maintenance. Sydney talked about the narrow opening under the bridge. So I think there really is a clamoring for additional support, whether it's a state level. There's a lot of nonprofits doing great work. The Ko'olau Mountain Watershed Partnership is doing great work to try to remove albizia as part of these cleanups. But again,
And the
it's
Ala
really
Wai
going
Watershed Association.
Yes, and every week there's a different nonprofit group out by the Ala Wai throwing Genki balls in, and I know they're hoping
it
to eliminate the sludge and make it swimmable and fishable by 2026.
Yeah.
Not sure if I'm ever going to dip my toes in the canal itself, but
Yeah. And this plan doesn't really address the people in Upper Manoa. It doesn't really provide them that much flood protection anymore. So it's kind of
Did it before?
I think the challenge here, though, is where we're kind of at in this in the project itself. I know the Army Corps is, they're doing their part with community engagement, but we're really not going to get the details until they issue their draft report. I know they were initially targeting July to issue this. It's kind of slipped back to August at this point, but that's understandable. This is a very complicated and complex project. But
So in terms of the process going forward, Eric, presuming that you folks get to a place where you're saying, this is what, based on all of the input we've got, the science that we have, this is where we believe this is what this project should look like. At that point, you would need to seek a local match, which would require legislative approval by both the county and the state legislature, right? So we've got a lot ahead of us in terms of actually executing anything. Any sense of the timeline? So
it is, like I said earlier, it is challenging. So our study, our study is slated to end, May timeframe of next year. And so that's the timeline that we're currently working on to execute the study. But you're correct in that after the study ends, the federal government has to authorize construction. And then the federal government also has to appropriate or find funding for that construction. And then the local sponsor would have to find funding. And so, we are still, even though it feels like we've been in this study for a long time, we're still early in the overall process, right? And so it is very difficult for me to be able to talk about timeline, just because once we finish the study, it's kind of out of our hands until Congress says, okay, go and do good things, right? And then at that point, you're talking about a few-year construction timeline and so forth. So
it's interesting because what I'm hearing is that this project is fascinating. It's big. It's got a lot of people will be effective. There's a lot to talk about, but there's also a lot of time to do some other stuff in the meantime. And I'm wondering, both Sydney and Representative Garrett, what do you see doing that we should all be doing, that communities should be doing everywhere? I mean, these rain bombs could happen anywhere. It feels totally random sometimes.
Well, I think that the city could get the word out. There's a Nawaiakolu in the Ala Wai watershed. There's 43 schools, and they get together. They do a lot of work in the streams and educating the keiki to get out there, and they do cleanups, and on Earth Day, they're very active in the streams. I think by education, you need to get people more involved in the streams and understanding what they can and can't do in it. People chop down their mango trees and toss them in the stream. People need to know about their responsibilities. And as Representative Garrett said, if you had a central agency overseeing the cleaning of the streams, I think that that's what we can do now, plus these partnerships. They have a $1.8 million one right up now with the Ko'olau Mountain Partnership to clean the albizia and fence it in. You need more projects like that will be ongoing, and then have all these agencies get together, the state, the city, and nonprofit, all get together and see what they can do.
Representative Garrett, do you see a will to do that in government, to actually, on this particular issue, to join forces? I know on like homelessness and housing, they are making some progress and working together better. Right.
Yeah, I think we have to, again, wait and see what this draft report that the Army Corps is preparing reveals. It's hard to make an educated decision without really seeing the case made by them. And again, this, being at the legislature is all about just prioritizing needs and trying to figure out where we put our limited resources.
I guess what I'm asking you, though, is do you think that when it comes to stream maintenance, watershed restoration, that within the multiple jurisdictions that are involved in that, do you see people coming together to pool their resources to deal with it?
I think it's certainly a discussion worth having with the appropriate partners. I mean, I think...
not this last session, but the session before, legislature modified the improvement district law to allow improvement districts to be used for watershed management, if you will.
Explain how that would work.
Well, an improvement district is Waikiki. We have business improvement districts, but this would be an improvement district that we call it a civic, and this is what the Ala Wai collaboration is recommending, with the idea that that each of these communities would be, and the government's agencies would be represented on this improvement district, and then the improvement district would then attack these various issues in terms of the stream maintenance, if there's a flushing system for the Ala Wai Canal. There's a lot of different proposed projects, many of which are exactly the kinds of things that we would like to see in terms of more nature-based projects. But you need somebody to manage the process. So the idea is to have this civic manage the process. The question is, where does the money come from to do it? Originally, the legislature had allowed the counties to create a stormwater fee, if you will. That's the basis for the idea that the city has come up with. The civic, we were promoting the civic before the utility, but the idea then is once the utility is created, the civic would work under the utility.
Okay, let me ask Eric, Miriam. You know, when we talk about nature-based solutions, right? Have you seen jurisdictions that have aggressively gone to sort of a nature-based solution? I've seen how there's people building sand berms and big like sand dunes and stuff outside of their, usually for hurricane protection as opposed to this. Have you seen places where they've used a nature-based solution as an alternative to the diking and the berming and so on?
Yeah, so nature-based ways of reducing flood risk are employed throughout the country and elsewhere to reduce flood risk. It's always a challenge, though, and it's situation by situation, right? So we looked at a number of natural and nature-based measures within the Ala Wai watershed. We looked at reforestation with native species, removing the albizia. We looked at trying to promote more native Hawaiian taro farming practices throughout the watershed. We looked at, instead of creating a detention basin, creating a more wetland type system along the Ala Wai golf course. And in this system, because it's so urbanized and it is the watershed is what I say is flashy, right? Between the time it rains to the time it floods, there's not a lot of time in there because water runs off so quickly. And so a lot of those measures, and the fact that there's no space, really, there's very limited space to implement things like wetlands and so forth, those types of features just do not reduce flooding. They do not reduce flood risks under the events that actually we see drive risk within the watershed. And that is like the 20-year, the 50-year type events that we've seen in the past in the watershed. And so under those events, we don't see those types of measures having any measurable benefit or reduction in flooding in the stream. And so, yes, to answer your question, they do occur elsewhere, but it really does depend, their effectiveness depends on the system that you're in.
Sydney, your response to that?
I'm sorry.
No, he basically said that this particular watershed is so urbanized that a lot of the natural kind of processes you might put in would not have the mitigating effect that a project like this would have.
I think that's open for discussion, and I think that the flood pumps and everything they take out might help with it and keep your walls lower. So I don't know, and we've asked to see the data that the project is based on, but it hasn't been given over to us. So we did have some engineers who wanted to take a look at it. So I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah, and so to address Sydney's comment, in a lot of our public meetings, there has been, consistent requests for the data and the modeling, and I do want to mention that Representative Garrett had talked about the draft report. All of the analyses, more detailed description of the analyses and data, and results that we use to make decisions will be in the draft report. And so that is coming out very soon, right? Late August.
I need to interrupt you because now that you're bringing up this and we have to wrap up, could you please let us know how the public can weigh in on this? How do they get involved in getting their thoughts in?
Yeah, so we will have a number of additional public engagement events coming up for anybody to join, right? So the next event is this coming Monday. It's a Talk Story lunch hour, noon to 1 Hawaii time. So if you go to our website, there will be a link for that event. We will also be holding, prior to the release of the draft report, one additional public meeting. It will likely be a 2 to 3 hour event for folks that are just kind of getting up to speed ahead of the release of the draft report and providing kind of a final update for those folks that have been engaged prior to the release of the draft report. Once the draft report's released, again, towards the end of August, we will have 2 public meetings associated with the formal NEPA public comment period. It'll be a 45-day public comment period. We'll have a virtual meeting and an in-person meeting where the community can come and provide comments and ask questions about the plan. And so those are kind of, in a nutshell, upcoming events. All of that is laid out on the project website, honolulu.gov.
Thank you.
Ala Wai.
Thank you, Eric, and a lot of chances to get in on this, and a lot of thoughts that everyone should have about their communities all over the state about this issue. Mahalo to you for joining us tonight, to our viewers, and we thank our guests, Eric Miriam from the Army Corps of Engineers and Rick Eggett from the Waikiki Improvement Association, Sydney Lynch of Protect Our Ala Wai Watersheds, and State House Representative Andrew Takuya Garrett. Next week, Insights will be taking a break. Instead, please join us for Kākou, Hawaii's town hall. More than a decade after starting construction and billions of dollars later, the Honolulu Rail is finally welcoming its first passengers next week. We find out what you need to know, and will it be worth the ride? Please join us then. I'm Daryl Huff for Insights on PBS. Aloha.